Here we go. Hey, welcome to the playground. My name is Newman, and it's December 3rd. It's December 3rd, 2024. This is the Gimbalabs Playground. We're here on Tuesdays. Check the calendar. It's every other Tuesday is our sort of rhythm, but sometimes we meet. I'm facilitating with some of the others here. That means that I'm mindful of the agenda and I can answer questions. I do these little opening scripts, and we'll close it, et cetera, et cetera. I'm here to help. And if you have any questions in the middle, you feel free to ask. I will be monitoring the chat. So um, the game is 90 minutes. We'll break in the middle and at the end. And I'm happy to introduce Steve, who is the host, the showrunner, the producer, a longtime friend, and superhuman. Steve, how's it, Steve?
Hey, thank you, Newman. I have no idea how to follow up with that. My production for this episode of Playground was me saying, "Hey, James, why don't you talk about Andamio on December 3rd?" He was like, "Oh, okay." So my hosting ability on this particular episode is going to be more just to let James run with it, and I'm sure he's got interesting things to say. And like in the good old days of Gimbalabs meetings, I will ask naive and or impertinent questions occasionally. So take it away, James.
Great stuff. Thanks. Yeah, I'm glad this worked out today. Thanks for the stage, and it's fun to be here. And for anybody, who might be a little newer to Playground, one of the things we really tried to do in the early days is to introduce a technical concept in a relatively short amount of time, and then really spend the bulk of our conversation talking about the implications of that tech. You can imagine why this is important as blockchains get up and running and as we figure out what they're good for. And we've been working really hard on Andamio, and I think we've invented a few really important ways of doing things. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to kind of take just a little spin through some of what we've built and then to have a far-reaching conversation about what it might mean. Sound okay?
I like
Cool,
that.
cool. And yeah, I'm really grateful that we get to spend this time together. I know that I'm feeling the pull. My eyes are on Buenos Aires this week, just wondering what's going on down there. And
Mhm.
I'm glad we have friends who are representing, and we'll come back with stories. But in the meantime, we get to sit here and keep doing what we do. So Andamio.io is up and running, and as a lot of people know already, there are courses available, right? People can come and they can learn. The Plutus PBL course has been hosted here along with Mesh for a while at this point. Martin and Adriano and the Game Changer team are building a course. Hinson put together a mini course about whiskey. We have a Getting Started with Andamio course in development, and Aiken PBL just went live today. We had our first live coding session a few hours ago, and we'll continue to do that on Tuesdays. But we also recognize that in these early days, Andamio has kind of been signaling that it's a learning management system, right? This is the easiest way to understand it. Oh, it's a place where people can come to learn. And not only that, what kind of people? Well, developers, because look at all these courses right here. They're developer oriented. But this is really just because this is the first thing we rolled out. And what Andamio is really doing is building a bridge from learning to contribution. And that's why you see these words on the homepage of the site. We have the banner about Fund 13, but we're playing around with this concept of learning to work, not learn to earn, because we've talked about the science of that before. It's really not best practice in a learning environment just to give people something directly for learning in terms of whether it's tokens on a Web3 LMS or whether it's chocolate in the high school classroom, right? What we want to do is we want to help people build up the feedback loop but really try to make the motivation to learn inherent in the process itself. And the way we're doing that is by looking at how people can build up a reputation for what they learn and then apply that to other opportunities. So some of you are familiar with the Gimbalabs prototype, and we can just take a quick look at that here. Type about Andamio.io. We've had this up for a while. We've been using it. 16 people have made commitments here and have tokens to do so. And there's a treasury that has some funds in it. There's a list of tasks that I can commit to. But this is only a tiny piece of the story. And this has been a useful piece of research for the Andamio team. And this goes back to even well before Andamio. Some of you might remember we called it the Gimbal Project Treasury and Escrow System, GPTE. This was before ChatGPT was a common term, and there was no confusion there. But we've been playing with these concepts since the very earliest days of Plutus PBL. These contracts were some of the first ones we wrote in the second iteration of the PPBL course, and we've been playing around with them in different ways as we've kind of been refining the system. Adrian's here. Adrian and Mix have been doing really groundbreaking work. They've been getting Plutus validators to do things that I'm not aware of happening anywhere else. And we've really pushed the limits of some of the transaction building libraries that we've leaned on along the way. But what we now have is a prototype at preprod.andamio.io of some of the features that are in development right now. This is publicly deployed at this URL, but if anybody here decides to play with it, just know that your data is not going to be saved for the long term. Okay, so don't go too deep if you do try to play around or follow along. And just know that any of the UI I show you today is going to look very different a week or two from now, because the core of our work right now is, now that the business logic exists, how do we wrap it up in an application that makes sense to people? And you might have some ideas about how we do that today. And that's really what I'm hoping to get out of this conversation, is to think together about what you would expect the platform to look like, given that it can do these things. And we're working really hard. We're just out of a product team meeting from Andamio right now, talking about some of our next steps and putting pieces together. Nelson and I are working really hard on delivering the user stories that we're developing as a team. But for now, just to get into the kind of the loop that I want to show you, right? We're already aware that there's courses, and we can view those a bunch of different ways. This page looks pretty similar to the one I just showed you on the live Andamio site. But in addition to courses, we have this idea of a project. And there's a couple listed right here just as examples, right? Some QA on the Andamio team. Mesh is looking at onboarding some interns and thinking about ways for them to start contributing. Gimbalabs is already running open spaces, and we're starting new projects all the time. And lead gen is something that is kind of beyond the scope of this meeting, but you'll hear more about this one. And I think we need to have a dedicated playground with the lead gen team, maybe in early 2025. But the idea here, notice that some of these have no prerequisite indicated, and others say they have a prerequisite. And this is the thing I really want to demo today. What's the connection between a course which creates on-chain evidence that some prerequisite is met, and the project that somebody can ultimately participate in? And to do this, I just wanted to take you through, once again, not perfect UI, but just the business logic of starting up a new project, populating it with some work to be done, and then thinking about this concept of prerequisites. And I think that's going to be enough to get us into a pretty nice conversation about, again, what does it all mean, right? What are the implications of this technology now existing? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start a new project. Let's do it, right? Start a new project on Andamio. I'll press this button. Once again, don't worry too much about the UI. It's not going to look like this forever, but we can start one. And I thought as an example, we can do one that we were working on last Thursday at Open Spaces,
Oh man.
where we have a project, right, that we're thinking about. We're taking it through the proposal writing process, and we're thinking about creating this Asteria app. So imagine that we have a new project called Asteria app. Newman, should we call it something different? Is there something
Uh,
specific?
no, I think I've thought some about the title, but I think actually Asteria app because there's all sorts of things like Asteria app with the T3 framework, with mesh, with in collaboration, blah blah blah. But I think Asteria app is the perfect short title.
Right. So we could put whatever words we want. We can edit this later, but sure, let's keep it just as Asteria app for now. And we know that this could change. Asteria, in case you're wondering, is an on-chain game. It's a set of smart contracts that have been built by TX Pipe, and there is some front end already existing for it. But like any on-chain code, access to interacting with that code, right, which is all on the public ledger, we can build other front ends. We can build other heads for that application and give people access to different UI. Ultimately, the same is going to be true for Andamio. All of the contracts that are running under the hood on the Cardano blockchain can be used by other application developers to build different web interfaces. So that's in the future. And we are delivering on Andamio.io as the first front end for interacting with the Andamio network. But the goal is for it to not be the only one. So I just made a project. I'm welcomed into it, right? And you can imagine some kind of onboarding flow right here. But some of these concepts are important. You can set, oh, double T, look at that typo. You can set up some
Found one.
prerequisites. You can create some acceptance criteria. And when you're ready, you can place your project on the Andamio network. I'm going to demonstrate these two parts today. And soon we'll have a full demo with all of the on-chain parts. But I really wanted to stay at kind of the concept level for today. And we'll dig into the transactions when a little bit more of the UI is complete. So let's jump in. Okay, got it. Now I have a project page. There's our title. We can always go back and edit that later. And what does a project consist of? Well, it consists of a list of things that need to be done, right? So let's just start with that concept for a moment. Newman, if we were going to build the Asteria app, what's one of the things that might need to be done?
All right. So in the Notion, I just ran because I normally don't use the tasks, but it was hold on, I'm scrolling down to it. It's all the way down here at the bottom. Present the proposal or draft proposal is the first task. And actually I set that up as a subtask. But first one is draft, write a proposal.
We could say like write an S3 proposal about the project
Yeah.
and bring it to open spaces.
Yeah.
And again, this can all be changed later. And eventually we'll want to pay you for that, right? I don't know what that's worth. Is that 150 ADA? It's hard to say in a bull market like this one.
Yeah, right, right.
Really generous. Okay. And we can put a date on that, right? It's nice to know the end date of things.
Okay.
And then down here, we have this concept of acceptance criteria, which might be familiar from Catalyst, for example. Right? How will we know when this thing is done? Well, let's see. We want a proposal doc is published in Notion.
Yeah.
And maybe we want a presentation at Open Spaces.
Yep. Yeah, that's simple. I mean, there could be a bunch in there, but yeah, those are the two big ones.
Exactly. And right, so it's easy to add and remove these. I could X these out just as easily. But for now, let's say that's good enough. Okay, now we have a task. And you can see that I can write a bunch of tasks that are going to populate this project. And each one might have some rewards attached to it. Each one has acceptance criteria, expiration date. Any questions so far?
What if you want to make a change in there? Oh, you hit the button, project.
Oh, and that's not populating because we just changed this. I need to change what this button points to. But yeah, that should pop up with
Yeah.
populated, not this new task page.
Okay. Cool enough.
That's what's going to be available right there.
And we found a bug.
We found a bug. Fix that
Nice.
button. All right. Now, anytime a task is created, it only defaults to draft status. Anytime I create a new task, that's why this button right here says draft a new task, right? So I can make another one. What's something else that needs to happen? Let's say just
Research.
initialize.
Yeah. Well, initialize a repo or, but no,
Yeah,
I was the what's in progress right now is research. So understanding what Asteria is, and then play Asteria. I haven't been able to play it yet. Yeah, play the game. Look at the repo on GitHub. Try to understand how it was built. For instance, I learned that there are two game engines that they're using. They're using a thing called Godot, which is sort of based on Python. It's kind of a Pythonic system, and then another game system built in Rust or Go. But anyway, yeah, like how is Asteria built? What type of skills and things do you need? So research, how you would create a project. Um, and then I've got a bunch in that sort of thing.
Beautiful. So write a whole bunch of research, and maybe this would be multiple tasks. And this is kind of just like Notion here once we get to this level, right? It's cheap to draft new tasks. And that's why it's really important that these are only saved as drafts first. Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, it's going to take a little more time. Maybe we don't want that research until the new year. All right, fine. So we can have multiple tasks. They're all in the draft stage. Now, eventually, these tasks are going to be approved. And when that happens, that means that they are ready to be published on the blockchain. This is a really important interaction right here. This, I think, is where the work we've been doing at Open Spaces meets this application right here. What is the group process and who are the stakeholders involved in deciding that a task is approved, that the expiration time is appropriate, that the reward for completing this task is fair? Once the relevant stakeholders agree that that's happened, we move from draft to approved status.
Okay.
I'm really excited over the course of 2025 to experiment with on-chain governance. Okay, so Mix and Adrian have established some really interesting on-chain processes for groups of people with different access to participate in approving tasks like these. Yeah, Emmanuel, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know if anyone can hear me. My network has been really frustrating since.
It's good to hear you, man. Yeah, we got you.
Yeah, me seeing this now, I think my thought just went straight to Notion, the Gimbalabs Notion template. But I just want to ask, like, what's the real difference between these and the Notion? Because I think I just heard of validating it on chain, like this project. I also don't really get that part. Like how is it going to be sent on chain? Is it through the metadata to the data, or I don't really understand. So yeah.
Completely. Okay, so yeah, this is obviously in a short amount of time, we're not going to build better functionality than Notion. But there's actually some really exciting stuff happening. About a month ago, Notion had its first big developer event, and they kind of announced some features they've been working on, and their pathway forward. There's a lot of exciting stuff there. But one of the things they are committed to is always improving the Notion APIs. So anything that we do in Notion can be integrated with other tools. So ultimately, one of our plans is for all of the on-chain Andamio stuff to integrate seamlessly with Notion. We should be able to plan a project like this one using the best-in-class tooling of Notion, but then still have access to the on-chain stuff that Andamio offers. So look forward to that. But what this piece is doing right here is giving us the bare essentials. And you had a question about what goes on chain. Well, when it comes to publishing these tasks on chain, it's all going to live in the datum of a UTXO in a treasury that is associated with this project. Now, it doesn't matter too much this concept of a treasury, and we're playing with how much exactly the end user wants to see of what's on chain. And we're going to refine that a lot over time. There's going to be some give and take there. But at the end of the day, what we will do is say, okay, well, this is approved. This button, like you just saw, is broken, so I can't show you the functionality. I wish I had noticed that that was there. Um, but the way it's supposed to work is that if this was the correct button, what pops up when I click it is that after this task has been approved, it can no longer be edited, and we store a hash of these three parts right here. It's title, description, and acceptance criteria. How do hashes work? Well, all a hash does is it takes some arbitrary block of information and it turns it into a unique identifier, right? Maybe like a policy ID, that identifier is 56 characters long, right? What's nice about this is that you can't recreate just by knowing the hash, the original block of information, but you can always confirm that the information hasn't changed by checking that the same hash is generated. So in other words, we can create this task. We can say we all approved of it this way. We generate that hash. And then if I change anything, even if I change this, whoops, even if I change this capital P to a lowercase p, that'll change the hash of the task. And when somebody sees that there's a mismatch between what we approved on chain and what the task actually says, that should lead to an error. Hey, wait a minute. You changed the game. You changed the deliverables, right? Yeah. And so we want people to be able to validate that the project they're participating in is the thing that the group approved. Okay, so there's a few more things to see here. The other critical piece, and I'm still onboarding, so I can't see everything. And this is going to be automated. You'll have a little wizard that takes you through kind of onboarding and how to use it. And when you complete it, you'll now have full access to the project view. And so there's a few things we were not yet able to see. Right down here, we can see that there are contributor prerequisites and project acceptance criteria. This one's a little simpler, so we're going to start here just to show you this, because I believe that all of this is connected to governance. Setting acceptance criteria, if I just have to pull it out of thin air every time I write a task, that might be pretty demanding and maybe a barrier to getting stuff done. But if I'm working on a group, we might want to identify some acceptance criteria in advance to ease that cognitive load and make sure we're not asking people to reinvent it every time. And at the project level, this is also a form of governance. What are some acceptable acceptance criteria? How about a Git PR? Right? How about, what do we say, a proposal doc in Notion? Right? Or maybe a live presentation. And you can imagine how a group of people could come together and they could also approve these acceptance criteria right here. Now, whatever the case may be, and I got to refresh the page because I'm not sure if it's caching right, but once at a team or a project level, we define these things, now next time I draft a new task, those are already preloaded in for me. And I don't have to do this over and over again. I can still just as easily remove them. Oh, a few of those are not relevant to the task I'm about to write, right? But they're preloaded in because as a team, we've already done that pre-work. Any questions about this concept of acceptance criteria?
No, it
So
seems, yeah. Yeah. I like that. I like that. I do think it would reduce cognitive load, and it sort of the idea of that it's a group decision making, which is another way to say collaboration, which is another way to say governance in a non-scary way and at a very real way. It's just like, okay, what do we accept as these acceptance criteria? And coming from Catalyst, it's a real, baked in kind of concept. A project has acceptance criteria. Um, yeah, yeah, that's good.
And this is the key thing, right? Like this, one of the primary goals of Gimbalabs and definitely of the work we're doing at Andamio is to take this big scary word, capital G governance,
It's
and
scary.
keep creating examples, right? Hey, what does that actually look like at a hands-on level, at the municipal level, at the level not of political posturing, but of actually getting stuff done? What are examples of what governance looks like? This is just another example of what that might mean.
Yeah, I think about it a lot. Like what does it look like for a 50-person company? What does it look like for a 300-person village? I mean, how do you actually get things done and not worry about it? How do you take personality out of the process? And that's a really, really big deal that it's hard to talk about, right? Because if you talk to people who aren't in this, like you have to be so deep into Cardano to think about this, to talk to my parents or my brother or my neighbors about this. Well, like personalities, just human nature, and you'll never take it out. And it's true, but if we can create mechanisms that are easy to engage with, and you can prove things get done, it really can change the nature of, not just how we view reality, but how we view our interactions with one another. I'm sorry.
And these hands-on decisions, they give us that context, right? And for me, it's not even about like removing personality from the equation. I want to be face to face with people who have all sorts of personality when we are defining contribution criteria. And in scope, right, we can do that. but we need appropriate scopes of decisions to make together. Is the Constitution Convention live streaming right now?
Oh, no, but I'm just thinking like this is the very topical. I don't I remember actually I think it was in the playground where Adam Dean was talking about whether or not they would do it. And because they're kind of got that the sort of the other group that couldn't make it down there. I can't remember where they're holding it. But they're gonna have like a distributor or a remote team, and it's yeah. Scott says it's starting tomorrow, the streaming.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, Wednesday. Yeah. But appropriate scope, and the Cardano Constitution is a huge scope, multinational, multi-regional. And then what we're talking about here with our little Asteria project is like a tiny scope, it's just the few people that are gonna accept this project, this cohort. And that could be, I mean, not to sort of speculate, but depending on what acceptance criteria we want to put and what the project is, and that's one of the beautiful things about writing down these proposals is is it a project of governance or is that included? So like when the cohort comes together, do they decide a new acceptance criteria of what they will accept as, does that have this sociocracy stuff? And sorry if we're jumping into the deeper conversation now, but
Working.
that S3, like where the different circles, you've got like the over circle, they call it the delegator and delegatee, subcircle and subcircle. So if you draw the circle around the Andamio Gimbalabs community, and those aren't the same, but they are the ones that are issuing or consenting to or delegating, you can say, the project. Anyway, do they give the criteria and then the project team accepts those? Or does the project team have a governance function to say, this is how we want the project to be, and this is what we will accept, and that you can now approve? And then where does the approval sort of, because acceptance criteria is that go between for approval and yeah, this is the bridge between learning and contribution, I guess,
And as you're
in a
delegating
sense.
down into subcircles, yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot, right? Should these be preloaded from some organizational level, or is it up to the scope of a circle to come up with these anew every time? And maybe the answer is, well, we want flexibility.
Right.
It would be nice to have both options.
Right. And for certain projects, no, and yeah, depending. But it is definitely a good conversation to have, and it would just then
Well,
you would have different skill set and different team members, yeah.
yeah, I mean, like when you talk about an organization, right, there's different people doing different tasks. So if you've got some kind of project that you're putting forward to the larger organization, there should be a, kind of like an obvious handoff thing to the people that thing affects the most. Like not everybody has to approve about something that they don't do anything with. Like it should be the people most, for whom it's the most pertinent. Like that. And I don't know how to describe that. In a blockchain environment. Like who decides that? I assume like contributor tokens on one discussing in one direction or another, would be the ones that get to decide those parts, right?
There's, I
You don't
think,
want me telling me what should happen on Andamio, right?
right. Well, this is where we now get into the concept of an interface. So there's two wonderful I words, interface and isomorphism, right? Interfaces give us a way to a shared structure for communicating. And right when we talk about a user interface, it's the structure by which a human interacts with some machine or software process, but interfaces are just as important when it comes to how people communicate with each other. We've been talking, for example, in some of the more technical meetings lately about UTXO RPC, or in the T3 app, tRPC. RPC is a protocol or interface for how different elements can communicate with each other. And this is so important for people, right? If we set up the ground rules for how we communicate first, then that solves a lot of problems down the road. We already have the interface for how we communicate about what needs to be done or what will be done. And to just put this in a different context, let's now look at an isomorphism. This is the mathematical concept that one problem is very similar to another, right? And anytime you can find isomorphic problems, you might have an insight about problem A by working on problem B. And that's a very exciting thing. And so this structure of acceptance criteria right here should already look familiar because it's isomorphic with the way we handle student learning targets in a course.
Okay.
This is a project. Project tasks have acceptance criteria that represent the interface for how we communicate about whether or not a task is complete. But let's look at a course for just a minute. How are courses structured? Well, in Plutus PBL, instead of having tasks, we have course modules. And those course modules don't have acceptance criteria. They have learning targets. These learning targets are the interface, the governed, right, agreed upon set of outcomes for what will happen in this learning module. And if you've participated in any of the early planning of any PBL course at Gimbalabs, you know that we start not by writing lessons, but by agreeing, by governing the list of learning targets for a module. Because once we do that, now we have a shared goal. Now we have an interface for communicating with each other and deciding whether or not the learning materials sufficiently help people to do these things. And it goes a step beyond that. Just like the title and acceptance criteria are hashed and placed on chain to represent a project, the same thing happens with modules. We take this list of learning targets and we hash it in exactly the same way that I was describing earlier to represent what is the commitment of the organization teaching this course. It's to teach these things. The lessons might change, but the learning goals will not, right? And we have this common language right here. Does that make some sense now, kind of how these two sides of Andamio, the learning side and the contribution side, share this structure?
One's a tomato and one's a tomato.
And you might even get one tomorrow.
Wait a minute. Is it lunch? No, I definitely see it. And no one's ever explained to me isomorphism, that one problem or one area is similar to another, and that insight in one can help with another, and that insight or way we do it in contribution side can sort of inform, or we can sort of see similarities in the learning side, and it does map up, and there will be some interesting, thinking of Nori and wait a minute, emergent, like some things will emerge out of that interaction. Yeah. Well, for one, I think of like that's what you said about the lessons might change, but those student learning targets sort of are those achieved learning targets stay. That's why it's important for them to be on chain. I definitely have some stories, and we get into it later. I can, about I've been on so many learning projects, and they have all been sort of dispersed to the wind, and the hosting doesn't work anymore, and the so and so is not there, or I didn't document it correctly, etc. Um, hey, I do want to say that we are, because I'm as my facilitator role, like I'm mindful of the time, and sometimes time gets away from us, but we've got a little less than half, so that's 10 plus. We have like 30 minutes left. So
Sure.
if we're not live streaming. If you're listening to the recording, come and join us in Discord. If you're here in the room, this will be posted up on YouTube if we decide to, but they typically are. And you've got 30 minutes left to get what you came to get done. So let's hear from you. I'd love to hear this and start a great conversation. We've got big thinkers in Steve and James here to really guide us through and take us through this thing. If you're interested, I would love for you not to sit on your hands. You don't have to. You can feel at home here and jump in and join the conversation.
Woo woo.
Nice.
So, given everything that you've just said about this, James, and I don't want to, and we don't have to go this direction if you don't want to, but you've got some proposals. Andamio's got some proposals in Catalyst, and I don't know if they're like tangential stuff or do they support what you've been describing for us here. If you could go through that.
They absolutely do. Let me finish the loop. There was one
Okay.
key concept I was trying to get to, and I can get there in the next 90 seconds. And then I'll show you where the upcoming proposals fit in because they're very much connected to this, the way I'm describing governance. So to wrap up the core concept here, we know that someone can enroll in a course. They enroll on chain and they can earn on chain credentials for completing any number of these modules in a course. The way people earn those credentials is by completing assignments, and we'll do a full deep dive into the technical parts of this as Andamio continues to roll out. I'm going to stay at this high level today and just say that, okay, a student can enroll in this course and can earn a credential for having completed, for example, module 100 in this course. And when they do, there is a hash that helps people confirm that indeed these are the learning targets that somebody completed if we're giving them a credential for that module. Tasks inside of projects work the same way. I can complete tasks inside of a project. The acceptance criteria are hashed, and people can validate that, yes, because I finished this thing, I must have been able to deliver on this task. And this leads to kind of a picture of how somebody is learning and contributing in a network that can be used to grant access to future opportunities. And there's two opportunities I want to show you here. One is, how do we gate access to a project like this one? And then two, how do we gate access to governance? And that's going to get us into the Fund 13 proposals. So the first question, now that I've built a project, I showed you acceptance criteria over here just as a concept to help us think about how a project is planned. But the real magic happens right here. To commit to a task in this project, a contributor must complete the following course credentials. Ultimately, these prerequisites will not only be based on courses, but can also be based on prior contribution to other projects. You can imagine how this might work similar to how internships work, right? Hey, anybody is welcome to come aboard a project and take on some of the lower stakes tasks so they can prove what they're capable of and learn how this team operates. Eventually, they get access to greater responsibilities, right? But before we even get to that, let's think about, well, what would be the prerequisite to being a contributor here on this project? I bet you can imagine a few, right? We might decide we want somebody to participate in some kind of onboarding to Gimbalabs. We might want them to have some background about S3. Well, if we want that, we can create a prerequisite. Just as an example, before I give this thing a name, when I create a prerequisite, I choose courses, one or more of them, to add to this prereq. Maybe we want to make sure that people have completed some or all of PPBL 2024. Now remember, each of these modules is already represented on chain as kind of the roll-up of the learning targets in that module. And once somebody completes the module and earns credit for that, now we can check against that. We can say, okay, anybody who, let's just say they got to at least have done the first 4 modules in PPBL, right? And we'll call this the Asteria project prereq for now, okay? Maybe I also want people on the team who have some experience with mesh or Aiken. Heck, we have an Aiken PBL course. Maybe we should use that. And we need to clean this up. This is just drawn from everything, but where is it? Somewhere in here. I can't find. There's the HK one. Whiskey's pretty nice. There it is. Yeah, okay. We need you to have a little bit of Aiken experience too. Maybe we want all of those modules, right? But in any case, we roll up all of these course requirements into what we call a prerequisite. And now, oh, the data revalidation needs to be fixed there. That's a caching issue. We will learn about that when we build the Asteria app. Oh no, now I have to just choose it from here. Okay, so here's the Asteria project prereq. Yep, that's PPBL modules 100 through 103 and Aiken PBL modules 100 through 202. Great. Let's call that the prerequisite for this project. And what's happening on chain here, this is what the Andamio network does, is it says anybody who's completed these prerequisites will be able to join this project as a contributor. And when they do, they will be able to commit to these tasks and earn these rewards. That's the glue that connects the course stuff with the project stuff I'm showing you right here. So hopefully that raises some questions for you. There's a lot more to say about that, but this is the essential concept of what Andamio is delivering on chain. So let me pause right there. What questions does that raise?
I mean, part of the prereq's just what you gave. I mean, can you put in there like an order as well, like an order in which they needed to be completed?
At this point, it's binary. It's whether or not you have achieved
Gotcha.
these things. But just like we can set prereqs for projects, it's possible for one course to be a prerequisite for another, right? So you can only enroll in one course if you've already got these prereqs in another. And that would be a way of enforcing some kind of order through content. One thing we are wondering about is ultimately how much of a distinction does there need to be between a course and a project? How blurry can the lines be? Either way, right? You are making commitments either to learning or to doing, but often I make commitments to learning and doing at the same time. Hey, you need me to do something? Yeah, I'll figure that out. And I'll both get the job done, but I'll also get some new skills along the way.
But over time, that's changing, right? I mean, because you have learned all of these core elements to building. Yeah, I'm off base here.
Kevin, thanks. All right, so now the other side of things, okay, is the governance side. And this is what the Andamio Fund 13 proposals are about. We've got 3 proposals. One of them is pretty much a 50-50 collaboration between Gimbalabs and Andamio. It's the proposal about the maintenance of the PPBL 2024 course. So Monique and Caesar are already on this project. Is Andrew here on this call? I think he was here earlier. And we'll be meeting later today. That project is really groundbreaking because it takes the work we've already been doing in PPBL for a few years, and it really looks for a way to make sure that that becomes a sustained resource, right? And if Gimbalabs doesn't even own Plutus PBL forever, that will be okay with me, right? I want that course to exist. I'm really proud of what we've done so far to bring it into the world. And more than ownership, I just want to make sure that it can sustain itself, right? That there's people who are excited to update it, right? And we can make sure that it stays that. This is a really interesting project, right? Because what it's doing for the Andamio side is it's giving us the chance to practice using a system like this, where the project is not to build the Asteria app, but to update the course. But we can play around. Well, if you're going to be a maintainer of the course, shouldn't you have also completed some of it, right? So there's kind of this built-in way to use prerequisites. And then, most importantly, for the group of us to govern what happens. And this comes in right here, right? We need groups of people working on some small projects right now so that we can figure out how governance works. What is the best way to have a conversation about toggling this status from draft to approved? What is the best way for a group of people who have a project to complete and typically a limited budget, right? How do we allocate funds to the most important tasks that need to be done in a way that everybody who's a stakeholder says, yeah, not only do I approve of the work to be done, but I approve of the timeline and the funding as well. And all of this is connected to the other Andamio proposal about governance. It's called, what's it called? Governance, a user-controlled future. I don't have the name of it right in front of me right now. But we can grab those links and take a look. But what we have are a set of different validators that support different decision-making processes. And in the future, this won't be part of the initial release of Andamio when it goes live in January, but we're going to shift our attention to providing a set of governance components that can be toggled kind of like an application setting. Hey, when you create your project, what decision-making process do you want your team to use when they decide to approve tasks and to approve budgets? All of that access to governance, in addition to using the validators that allow different people to carry different weight into decision making, will also be built on top of prerequisites the same way that this is. So here's another isomorphism for you. By completing these course modules, I might have access to participating in this project. By completing some set of course modules and project contributions, I get access to decision-making power. And this is different from how we handle decision-making at the catalyst level right now, right? The weight of my decision-making power is based on how much ADA I hold. And that's important for a lot of reasons. We can't replace that directly, but even as we are working within a system where that's one kind of decision-making, another kind of decision-making is let's give people who have a record of learning and contribution the ability to have a say in decisions like this. So that's really the focus of those two proposals. And then we have a third one where we are working with TXPipe and Blink Labs to deliver an RPC, right, that makes it easy to communicate with the Andamio network. Any questions about those kind of roadmap steps? Or I know I just shared a lot right here with this concept. This is really what I wanted to get people to start to understand today, because this is what glues together everything you already know about the learning management system with the full-fledged platform that's rolling out. Thanks, Roberto.
Okay. All right. Come on, let's hear some let's hear some questions.
While you're thinking, we're playing around with language. So Newman, you noticed like the S3 connections. We actually have a little button right here. This probably won't be in production, but it might be like a premium feature. I can actually change my language skin to S3. Oh, and now this is a backlog, for example. And we might have a circle instead of a project, for example. So there's some stuff that we're still playing around with, but I think we're settling on calling this a project for initial launch.
Right. Well, yeah, the context, this is great for context. And it puts into context of all these things that we've been doing uh, over the last year or more, or however we want to draw it far back. But I can definitely see some interesting emergent sort of qualities, and which is really something that I love. I love that that you can look and see these courses. It's just like a video game or like a talent tree or a quest where you go on and get something, and you know how the role-playing game quests work. It's like, okay, you go out and the reason why you go out to get that is to collect something to build something else, and it's like that's where nice, juicy, dynamic interactions and economy and relationships can form. Um, and I would love to see that. I would love to see that. And we have been working with it, like Catalyst and all of this governance stuff has been putting us together. And now we have a tool where we can really get practical things with it. Yeah, yeah. I mean, doesn't it, like the people that are here, doesn't it sort of make you want to um, like contribute and have something stick around, and that you're contributing for something useful,
Uh,
or something practical, I guess.
for me, absolutely. And I'm relatively new to, the to Cardano, so it's just a very clear pathway to becoming active, to being a contributor. So I think it looks really great. Like on a personal level, it makes me feel like very excited to. I'm just like, okay, I understand what's needed. I understand like what like how to get from step A to step B.
Yeah.
Monique and I first met at the Cardano Summit in New York a few weeks back, and we covered a lot of ground in a short time. But Monique, you mentioned a a community application that you wanted to build, and it got me so excited to share this with you. And so I'm excited over time to like learn what parts resonate and what skin you would put on this, and maybe if there's a different kind of application UI that would support the use cases you have in mind.
Yeah, definitely would, love to talk to you more about that. But I love what I'm seeing so far for sure.
Thanks.
Hey James, so like in the future, the goal would be to have other projects also upload a course and then they could, do the yeah, okay. And then they could provide their own roadmap as far as what their employees or contributors want to do. And okay.
Right. And so here's actually a really interesting thing to keep in mind. So yes, that's 100% part of the plan.
Hmm.
And at the very same time, we're going to find out how essential that story is, right? Before we think about companies, just think about the learner for a moment, right? And this is early UI right here, just this list, right? But imagine if I moused over a Stereo app and the courses I needed just lit up, right? Or were automatically filtered, right? Oh, I'm interested in this project. Okay, I see the map of what I need to do. That's wonderful. The on-chain part, however, it it only requires that someone issues a credential, right? Issues that on-chain attestation about what's being learned, right? So here we can actually let's just go back here for just a second, right? So Plutus PBL, right? There's going to be representations on chain for each of these modules. And we know that those modules are described by the set of learning targets here. But no part of what's on chain says that you have to go through this course interface to learn these things. On the other hand, right, you might not need the course interface at all. You might say, hey, we have a set of things that we need contributors to know and be able to do. And the way we assess that is not by having people work through a course right here, but we have them come give a presentation at an open meeting, right? And when they do, we issue a learning credential that on the blockchain looks exactly like the credential you would get for completing this assignment right here, right? And so as we roll out on initial rollout, there won't be too much of a distinction between the Andamio network and this Andamio app, just because that's how you have to bring new things into the world, right? It's all integrated for now. But the moment people start using and understanding this, we're going to shift our attention to making sure that the network is sustainable for the long term. And when that happens, this entire course interface becomes a helpful tool that we, as the builders of the Andamio platform, we're going to provide this. And we're gonna charge like a service fee, kind of like any Web 2 platform would. You'll be able to pay a monthly or annual subscription to have access to the course interface stuff. And we're hoping that's a compelling enough value prop that we can have a viable business. But people will be able to use the Andamio network even if they don't host a course on the Andamio platform. Does that part make sense?
Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Well, so is the Andamio, what is the Andamio network? Like, is that the, I mean, is that section of the blockchain where all this is stored? Is it the community, like the network of courses and projects? What is the matrix? What is the
Right.
Andamio network?
It's the set of validators on the Cardano blockchain that allow all of this to happen.
Okay.
And so you'll have to have an Andamio token to collect your credentials. That token has a specific policy ID and it needs to be minted from somewhere, right? Once you have it, you can collect credentials from anybody who puts a course on chain or who puts a project on chain.
And so
This,
like,
this interface facilitates that. But if Andamio is successful, especially on the network side, then in the future, there's going to be other web applications that allow you to participate in this network. And the application I'm showing you right here will just be the first one.
A future of
how
other apps that interface with the chain. Yeah. Okay.
so can this in the long run be used as a, I don't know, I was thinking more like part of a did wallet type thing to where like you carry around your education and stuff like that, or where you can also verify somebody's identity by certain courses they take. Is any of that, are any of those examples feasible in this platform?
100%. So yeah, we actually have a Fund 12 proposal that we're working on right now, and it's called Self-Sovereign On-Chain Identity. And Adrian and Mix just published the first paper about that, and we delivered it with the milestones. Mix, do you have that link handy, or Adrian, if you could drop that in the chat if people want to take a look.
Sure, I'm going to.
But yeah, we fully believe that this is going to bridge the gap between blockchain and DID solutions. There's some known problems about what DIDs can do and what the limits of that are. And what we want to try to figure out is what is a sufficient on-chain identity that's safe enough in terms of like the privacy perspective, while also being robust enough to give the right people access to the right opportunities. And so, your Andamio token, it's just going to be a native asset on Cardano, just like any other token. And this is one of the questions I'm most excited to find out the answer to is when this thing is operating at scale and people can earn credentials for learning what they've learned, and people can use those credentials to join projects, contribute to projects, earn rewards and governance access. They build up that whole track record. It's in the datum associated with their Andamio token. And yet, anytime, they could sell their token to somebody else, right? I could buy Scott's Andamio token, which would give me all the privileges he's worked so hard to earn. The question is, what percentage of people will sell those tokens that way? Will it be worth it? It's going to be non-zero, right? But will it be a very high number, right? And Andamio, what we've done is we've built guardrails to kind of minimize the negative impact of that happening. We expect it to happen. We hope and we hypothesize that those SSOI tokens, this self-sovereign on-chain identity that you're building up, will be important enough to you that you don't want to sell it to somebody else, right? But when you do, let's think for a moment about what happens. Going back to the project contribution side, right? What you'll be able to do is make one commitment to one task. So if I buy Scott's Andamio token from him, I'll be able to say, okay, Well, now I can jump into that Asteria project and I can make a commitment to doing work. And at that point, one of two things are going to happen. I'm going to be able to get that work done, or I'm not. If I can't, right, well, now I just wasted money on an access token that I actually can't use effectively because I still need somebody to approve that I did the thing I said I was going to do. All that token allows me to do is commit to doing something, but I still got to get it done, right? And if I can do it, well, to the organization, right? To Newman, who's leading this project, does he care if Scott or James did the work if it got done? No skin off his back if Scott sold his token and somebody else got Scott's work done. Still, the work got done.
I mean,
And right, and in any case, you can only commit to one thing at a time, right? All I can do is commit to one thing, and I got to keep doing the next thing. And right, that's the piece by piece. That's how we're building up the scaffolding, one commitment and achievement at a time.
this is and this is what makes the Barcelona proposal so attractive, right? Because you've got that, statistically significant population out there that could get exposed to this. And they've already got their trinkets and baubles that they trade and things that they do in their community to, be viable inside of that community. Like this really gives them a platform to really do that sort of thing, trade whatever they think is valuable within that community and earn the things that they trade. I don't know, like I don't know, I mean, how complicated, James, how do you encompass the significance of what this represents to, people like that, football fans, right? Like how do you get across to them that thing? And I remember years ago I had that conversation with my son-in-law, and he was part of this community of people that was into drifting, and they had a rich guy that built a track, and they were running the food stands, and like there was a community there of like hundreds and hundreds of people that were paying significant amounts of money to be a part of that. And I was trying to explain to him then, you can tokenize this, and everybody's investment in the what they were doing for fun would actually become like a wealth growing dynamic. And I still don't know how easy to understand talking about that with people like this is. It still seems really abstract to explain the dynamics of it, the mechanics of it, and how they can apply it in their lives as they live them now. Like I really would like to, I would really like to figure that out.
Yeah. You don't do it all at once, right? I know that I have the spirit of an 8-year-old when I talk about this stuff, right? I just got a new toy and I just want to talk at you about it, right? We're not going to achieve it that way. What we need to do is we need to give people an experience that makes them want to do the next thing, one little piece at a time, right? And that's why the Barca project is so exciting for us. Really high hopes that that one gets through Catalyst this round because it gives us a chance to figure out the answers to those questions you're asking with a really compelling global group of people. But a lot of it comes down to the idea of gamification, right? Gamification of classrooms was a big thing when I was teaching high school, right? And it's one of those perfectly misused concepts, right? Gamification does not mean show me pretty graphics, right? Show me a spaceship flying through space with grade A video game graphics. Gamification means giving people a structure so they understand perfectly what the next step is, and they get just the right reward for doing it. And once you start building up this on-chain representation, if the application right here shows that in a compelling way, that's gamified, right? That's engaging people to say, hey, I just earned a thing and I want to use it and I want to take the next step, right? And we've already gotten early feedback. Some of Newman said it a year and a half ago, right? Like working through PPBL 2023 made it feel like a video game. That's a really powerful experience to have. And we want to give people that. So there's still plenty of experimentation to do, but we know that that's the idea. How can we help you take the first step, give you just enough feedback that you want to keep going, but then also not fall into the traps of just trying to build addictive technology for its own sake? No, like ultimately you shouldn't spend that much time on Andamio. You should pop in, find what you're going to be working on, and then go do it. Go live your life, right? Go do the work, and then come back. Just each time you need to figure out what the next thing to do is.
Good, Scott.
So, I'm going to close with Caesar's question that's in the chat too. I just don't want that to be skipped over.
We'll get that.
Is there going to be a dashboard or something that's going to be tied into this? Say, like, I don't know, you got a project manager in Cardano that wants to verify this token or verify the experience of this person versus having to read whatever's on the blockchain and make all the associations there?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. And I'll let you answer Caesar's question. That was also a concern of mine as well.
Heck yeah.
And so what Caesar is saying is just curious, if someone loses access to their wallet, can I ask the team to provide me the same NFTs I already completed to show I've already did the work? And what would I have to show to prove I already did the work? It's sort of, yeah, what happens if we lose access to these wallets? Just like they can be sold, they can also be lost.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Thanks,
So
Caesar.
Mesh is doing a lot of incredible work right now with custodial wallets. And they're going to be releasing some enterprise grade features in the middle of 2025 that are actually going to be essential to a team like Andamio bringing this application to a broader audience, right? And we recognize that some kind of not, custodial version of an application might be a key ingredient in onboarding people for the first time. The key is you got to have that eject button, and you got to always encourage people to take custody of those wallets when they're ready. So that's one thing we're thinking about. Once you do have custody, the short answer is it's exactly like losing your keys to a wallet that has 10,000 ADA in it, right? That would be heartbreaking, but that's ultimately a feature of the blockchain that if I lose those mnemonics, there's nothing anybody can do about it, right? That's part of the answer. I lose it, that's that. But there's something more to it. Even though if I lose the keys to a wallet with a bunch of ADA in it, that ADA really is irretrievable, right? Here, we are very much talking about a social element to something. And remember that every time a commitment is completed on this platform, there's a person. This is we in the white paper we call this the human oracle layer, right? Nothing on Andamio happens without people interacting somehow. The facilitator of a course saying, yeah, you as a student, you did that module. The facilitator of a project saying, yes, this person did what they said they were going to do. And all those little interactions, those are what add up over time to be the SSOI, to be the on-chain credential that we're talking about, right? And this is this is you know, like a lot of us, we're all thinking about AI and what it means constantly. I truly believe blockchain is a necessary counterbalance to the depersonalization that AI offers us. Blockchain is a deeply human technology. It works for people. And these are very valuable transactions that are happening when one person says of another, hey, you did that thing, right? And if my reputation is the collection of dozens or maybe even hundreds of different people saying you did that thing and that thing and that thing and that thing and that thing, and therefore somebody else can choose whether or not they want to trust me. That's a very, very powerful thing. And we haven't really seen that yet. So, you know, Caesar, right? If we were working together for years and you misplaced your token, I wouldn't say you're out of luck. I'd be like, okay, great. Yes, let's help you reclaim as many of those credentials as you can. And sure, we can just like I could choose as the creator of a certain course or the administrator of a certain project. I could choose just to give you some quick credits right away, but that would still be me as a person doing that, and I wouldn't be able to force the mesh team to do the same, right? So still those credentials need to be rebuilt from somewhere else. But because we're talking about human relationships, sure, like there's ways we could help each other within the scope. But I just want to like reiterate this point, right? It's a non-custodial network, right? Once this thing is out in the wild, nobody but the owner of the mesh course or a mesh project is able to issue credentials for that. Nobody on the Andamio team will be able to like brute force add some credential that's not their own to somebody else's SSOI, right? So that's an important feature. But yeah, I'm excited to kind of figure out like what are the like the human layer best practices that come out of trying this out with each other. And Steve's point in the chat, understanding ourselves as real world assets is like the last realization. That's that one is so compelling to me because it was actually Professor Thompson, Simon Thompson's blog post like 3 or 4 years ago that made me say, "Oh, I'm going all in on Cardano. Like I'm gonna invest my time in this," because he described that. He was talking about Marlowe and he was talking about, right, roles within an organization can be tokenized. And that idea just blew my mind. And we've been researching it ever since. And the results, right, current results are what I'm showing you today.
Me too. I mean, I'd spent 20 years thinking we were doomed to an apocalypse. And this was like this idea, the fact that there was math behind this idea was like, oh shit. I didn't know people were that smart. You know, like it was like a spiritual perspective awareness for me that I'd had for a long time, but I didn't see any way to, you know, like make that a real thing in the world. So, lucky us.
Oh,
I appreciate the space. I know I talked a lot today. Thanks for the chance to share this with, and I'm excited to
I
keep
haven't heard you talk that much in a while, so it's nice. Does anybody have any other questions or stuff before we sign off the recording? Going once, twice. Hit it, Newman. Cut it
all
up.
right.
Bye.
Thank you so much for being here, and we will see you next time. Check the calendar. Look for us on Discord.